The stars were a tapestry of cold fire when Captain Ryan Hunt's ship was ambushed. The Valkyrie, a mid-range exploration vessel, stood no chance against the swarm of Crixie bioships. Their chitinous hulls glimmered with a sickly iridescence as they darted in and out of the shadows like predators. Despite the ship's advanced tech, the Crixie's bioorganic weapons breached their shields in minutes, filling the ship with thick, acrid smoke. Ryan barely had time to strap on his emergency breather before a sudden jolt threw him against the console. Darkness closing in. When he woke, the air was thick with heat and an earthy musk. He was restrained, bound to a vertical slab of rock by what looked like sinewy plant fibers. Around him loomed figures, tall, spindly insectoid beings with glossy carapaces and multifaceted eyes that glowed faintly in the dim cavern light. The Crixie. Their mandibles clicked in rhythmic patterns, a cadence Ryan realized was language. His translator implant struggled to process their speech, finally managing fragmented phrases. Harvest, honor the star's blood. He grimaced. It didn't take a linguistic genius to figure out he was in trouble. The jagged altar behind him, the ominous hum of energy in the air, and the intricate carvings of alien deities lining the walls screamed of ritual sacrifice. A particularly large Crixie approached, its thorax adorned with shimmering plates and glyphs etched in a glowing green substance. The translator pinged, "High Priest?" The High Priest raised a claw-like appendage, holding a curved blade made of what appeared to be obsidian. The other Crixie began to click and hum, their voices blending into a hypnotic drone. "Terrific," Ryan muttered under his breath. "Death by bug cult. Not exactly the hero's death I imagined." Just as the blade hovered above his chest, a piercing voice shattered the drone. "Stop!" The High Priest froze, his head swiveling toward the speaker. Ryan craned his neck to see her, a tall Crixie female with a more streamlined physique, her carapace glinting with hues of silver and deep violet. She moved with a confidence that suggested authority, but her presence sent a ripple of agitation through the gathered Crixie. The translator labeled her Soia, Rebel Priestess. The High Priest hissed, his clicking intensifying. The translation followed, "You defy the will of the stars. Soia, this offering is sacred. I defy your corruption." "Xyrek," she snapped, "this human is not for the gods. He is mine." The chamber erupted into chaos. Some Crixie hissed in approval, others in anger. Soia marched forward, her violet gaze locking with Ryan's. "Play along," she whispered in flawless English. Before he could question her, she placed her slender, clawed hand on his chest, her touch cool but firm. "By ancient law," she declared, "no sacrifice may be taken from one who is claimed as a mate. I claim this human as my sacred bond." Ryan blinked. "Wait. What?" The High Priest seethed, his mandibles clattering furiously. "You tread on heresy, Soia. And yet you dare not break the laws of our ancestors," she countered, her voice a blade of icy precision. "Release him." After a tense moment, the High Priest relented, gesturing sharply to the guards. The sinewy bindings fell away, and Ryan stumbled forward, rubbing his wrists. "Move," Soia whispered, her tone urgent. "We have little time." They fled through the winding caverns, the light of bioluminescent fungi casting eerie patterns on the walls. Soia led with swift precision, her movements almost hypnotic in their grace. "Care to explain what's going on?" Ryan asked, his breath ragged as he struggled to keep pace. "You were to be a sacrifice to the void deity," she said without turning. "A false god Xyrek uses to maintain control over my people, and claiming me as your mate. A desperate gambit," she admitted, "but it worked. For now." The cavern opened into a lush alien jungle, the air thick with humidity and the hum of unseen creatures. Towering trees with crystalline leaves sparkled in the faint light of twin moons. Soia paused, her antennae twitching as she scanned the surroundings. "Where are we going?" Ryan pressed. "To the resistance," she said. "There are those who oppose Xyrek's rule, who seek to restore the old ways. You might be the key to convincing them to unite." "Me? Why?" She turned to him, her violet eyes narrowing. Because you're an outsider, a symbol of something greater than our petty divisions. And because, she hesitated, then shook her head. There's no time. Follow me. The jungle was alive with danger. Massive, spider-like predators lurked in the shadows, their glowing eyes watching hungrily. Swarms of smaller, winged creatures buzzed in chaotic clouds, their stingers dripping with venom. Ryan kept close to Soia, who navigated the terrain with a practiced ease. Her claws sliced through dense foliage, and her antennae twitched constantly, sensing threats before they emerged. Do you always live like this? Ryan muttered, ducking under a low-hanging vine that writhed like a living thing. Survival is a way of life here, Soia replied. But it's worth it to see Zyric overthrown. Hours later, they reached a hidden clearing where a group of Crixie waited. These Crixie looked different, less adorned, their carapaces scarred and their eyes filled with defiance. Soia, one of them called, a younger male with a crackling voice. You've returned, and with a human? This is Captain Ryan Hunt, Soia announced. He was to be a sacrifice, but I claimed him as my mate to disrupt Zyric's plans. He is here to help us. Ryan raised a hand. Hi. Not sure about the whole mate thing, but yeah, I'm here to help. The rebels exchanged skeptical glances, but Soia silenced them with a sharp gesture. He's seen Zyric's power firsthand, she said, and he's not bound by our divisions. With his help, we can rally the clans and bring an end to this tyranny. As the rebels debated, Ryan found himself drawn into their world. Over the following days, he learned of the Crixie's fractured society, their history of once being united under a council of priestesses, and the rise of Zyric's cult. Soia, he discovered, was not just a rebel but the daughter of the last high priestess before Zyric's rise. Her claim to leadership was as much symbolic as it was strategic. Together, they began formulating a plan, not just to survive, but to strike back. And yet, in quiet moments, Ryan couldn't help but wonder, was he truly a savior to these people? Or had Soia bound him to a fate he could never escape? The jungle became their fortress, its dense canopies and labyrinthine paths shielding the rebel Crixie from Zyric's patrols. Under Soia's command, the resistance prepared for a campaign that could reshape their world. Ryan, despite his initial reluctance, became deeply involved. He worked tirelessly to adapt the Crixie's primitive weaponry with his knowledge of human technology, finding ways to turn their natural resources into tools of war. One evening, under the shimmering light of the twin moons, Soia joined him as he tinkered with a makeshift energy blaster. You've adapted quickly, she said, her tone softer than usual. Ryan glanced at her, wiping sweat from his brow. Adapt or die, right? Isn't that the motto of this place? She tilted her head, her antennae twitching slightly. It is, but not all who adapt thrive. You seem to thrive. Ryan chuckled. If this is thriving, I'd hate to see what failing looks like. He paused, his expression growing serious. But honestly, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. I mean, I'm just a guy trying to survive. You're asking me to help lead a rebellion. Soia leaned closer, her violet eyes locking onto his. You are more than you think. Ryan Hunt, my people are divided. Yes, but they are also desperate. They see you as a sign, a symbol that there is a world beyond our struggles, a world worth fighting for. That matters. Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. For a moment, Ryan thought he saw something more in her gaze, something vulnerable beneath the sharp edge of her resolve. Not all of the rebels were convinced of Ryan's value. While many admired his ingenuity, others questioned his loyalty. He's not one of us, hissed Clyrix, a burly Crixie with scarred mandibles. During a heated council meeting, how can we trust him to fight for our people when he has no stake in this war? Soia stood, her presence commanding. Ryan has already risked his life for us. He was willing to face Zyric's wrath when he could have fled. That alone speaks to his character. Clyrix's multifaceted eyes narrowed. Or perhaps he's using you to save himself. Humans are known for their cunning. I've read the records from the old archives. They are survivors. Yes, but not without cost. The room buzzed with tension, the other rebels murmuring in uncertainty. Ryan, who had been standing silently at the edge of the chamber, stepped forward. "You're right," he said, his voice steady. "I'm not one of you. I don't know your traditions or your struggles, but I do know what it means to fight for survival. And if you think I'm here for an easy way out, let me remind you, I didn't choose to be abducted, and I sure as hell didn't choose to be tied to an altar." The murmurs quieted as his words sank in. "But I'm here now," he continued, "and if I can help take down the guy who tried to sacrifice me, you better believe I'm all in." Soia gave him a subtle nod of approval, and though Clyrix didn't look convinced, he fell silent. One night, as the camp rested, Soia invited Ryan to a secluded part of the jungle where the crystalline trees formed a natural amphitheater. "I want to show you something," she said, gesturing for him to sit. As he settled on a smooth stone, she began to hum, a low, resonant sound that seemed to vibrate through the very air. The crystals around them glowed faintly, pulsing in time with her melody. Slowly, images began to form in the air, like holograms spun from light. Ryan watched in awe as scenes of Crixie history unfolded. He saw their ancient council, united and wise, guiding their people through times of prosperity. Then came the rise of Xyric, his fanatical followers tearing apart the council and establishing the brutal regime that now ruled their world. The final image was of a lone figure standing against the tide of darkness, a figure with Solia's unmistakable silhouette, and beside her, a humanoid shape. "What is this?" Ryan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "A prophecy," Soia replied, her voice heavy with emotion. "It was spoken long ago by the oracles of our ancestors. A foreigner would come, one unbound by the divisions of our kind, and help restore the balance. When I saw you on that altar, I knew," she trailed off, her antennae drooping slightly. Ryan leaned back, his mind racing. "A prophecy. Huh. No pressure." She smiled faintly, the gesture almost human. "I know it sounds improbable, but the fact remains, you are here. And everything has changed because of you." With Ryan's innovations and Solia's leadership, the rebels launched their first major assault on one of Xyric's outposts. The plan was simple: disable the energy grid powering the region's communication network and steal vital supplies. As they crept through the dense undergrowth, Ryan couldn't shake the gnawing sense of dread. He carried a makeshift energy rifle, its crude design a testament to his trial-and-error engineering. Beside him, Solia moved with deadly grace, her clawed hands gripping twin blades fashioned from Crixie crystal. The outpost loomed ahead, a cluster of spiked towers emitting a faint green glow. Crixie guards patrolled the perimeter, their movements eerily precise. "Stick to the plan," Solia whispered. The rebels spread out, each team taking their assigned positions. Ryan's job was to disable the main power conduit, a task that required him to crawl beneath the outpost's central structure. As he worked, sweat dripping down his face, he couldn't help but marvel at how surreal his life had become. The explosion came sooner than expected. A premature detonation from one of the rebel teams sent the entire outpost into chaos. Alarms blared, and the guards swarmed like angry wasps. "Fall back," Solia shouted over the comms. "Regroup at the extraction point." Ryan scrambled out from under the structure, narrowly avoiding a blast of green energy that singed the ground beside him. He sprinted toward the jungle, his heart pounding. Back at the rebel camp, the mood was grim. Though the mission had succeeded in disabling the communication network, they had lost several fighters in the process. "We can't keep taking losses like this," Clyrix growled, his mandibles clacking in frustration. Solia's expression was stoic, but Ryan could see the pain in her eyes. "Every victory comes at a cost, but if we don't fight, we lose everything." Ryan stepped forward. "There's got to be a better way. Maybe we can create a diversion next time. Something to draw their forces away before we strike." Clyrix scoffed. "And what would you suggest? Human? March into Xyric's stronghold and challenge him to single combat?" Ryan smirked. "Not exactly, but I've got an idea." Ryan's idea was simple: Create a diversion so audacious that Zyric's forces would be forced to respond, drawing them away from key targets. The resistance could then strike the more vulnerable areas of his network. Soia was intrigued, but others were skeptical, none more so than Clyrix. It's madness, Clyrix argued. You'd be painting a target on your back and putting all of us at risk. Ryan stood firm. If we don't take risks, we'll lose the momentum we've built. Zyric isn't expecting us to act boldly. He thinks we're scavengers picking at scraps. Let's prove him wrong. Soia regarded Ryan for a long moment, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the light of the campfires. Finally, she nodded. Tell us your plan. The plan revolved around an ancient temple deep within the jungle. According to Crixie lore, this temple was a sacred site where the High Priestess would commune with the stars. It had been abandoned for generations, but its symbolism remained potent. Ryan proposed infiltrating the temple and broadcasting a false prophecy from its central chamber. They would hack into Zyric's communication network and send a message of rebellion disguised as a divine revelation, claiming that the gods had turned against Zyric's rule. Zyric's power is rooted in fear and faith, Ryan explained. If we shake that faith, even a little, his grip will weaken. Soia added, and while his forces rush to suppress the message, we'll strike one of his major strongholds, the crystal refinery in the eastern cliffs. Without those resources, his weapons and defenses will falter. The rebels agreed, though unease lingered in the air. The temple was said to be cursed, and its proximity to Zyric's main territory made the mission perilous. Ryan, Soia, and a small team ventured toward the temple, traversing treacherous terrain marked by jagged rocks and venomous plant life. The jungle seemed almost alive, its sounds and movements more pronounced the closer they got to their destination. When they arrived, the temple loomed like a monolith from another age. Its spires reached toward the sky, and its surface was covered in intricate carvings that seemed to shift under the moonlight. This place gives me the creeps, Ryan muttered, gripping his rifle tightly. It is a place of power, Soia said, her voice reverent. The stars once spoke here. Perhaps they will again. The team entered cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the vast, hollow corridors. The air was thick with an unexplainable tension, as if the temple itself were watching them. At the central chamber, Ryan set to work, using equipment scavenged from Zyric's outposts. He began interfacing with the temple's ancient systems. Soia and the others stood guard, their weapons at the ready. As Ryan worked, he couldn't help but feel a strange pull, a sensation that something beyond his comprehension lingered in the shadows. When the broadcast began, Ryan's voice rang out across Zyric's territory, distorted slightly to sound ethereal and otherworldly. People of the Crixie, hear the voice of the stars. The gods have seen your suffering. They condemn the false prophet Zyric, who twists their will for his own greed. Rise, children of the stars, and take back your future. Soia stepped forward, her voice joining the message. I am Soia, daughter of the last true High Priestess. I speak with the authority of the stars themselves. Zyric's time is over. Join us, and we will restore the light to our world. The message repeated, broadcasting on all frequencies. Ryan cut the feed just as the sound of approaching guards reached their ears. We've got company, one of the rebels shouted. The temple erupted into chaos as Zyric's forces descended. The Crixie soldiers, sleek and menacing in their bio-armor, swarmed the corridors. Ryan and the rebels fought desperately, their makeshift weapons barely holding against the invaders. Fall back to the outer chamber, Soia commanded, her blades flashing as she cut down two attackers. Ryan fired his energy rifle, the recoil jarring his arm. How many of these guys does he have? Too many, Soia replied grimly. As they retreated, Ryan noticed the carvings on the walls glowing faintly. The temple seemed to pulse with energy, as if responding to the violence. We need to get out of here, he said. Now. Before they could reach the exit, a massive figure stepped into their path. It was Zyric himself, his carapace adorned with glowing sigils and his eyes burning with an unnatural light. You dare defile this sacred place? Zyric hissed, his voice reverberating through the chamber. "You will pay for your insolence." Soia stepped forward, her blades raised. "Your time is over, Zyric. The people will rise against you. They will bow, as they always have." Zyric snarled, lunging toward her. The chamber erupted into a brutal melee. Zyric's strength was immense, his claws striking with deadly precision. Soia fought valiantly, her movements a blur of grace and fury, but it was clear she was outmatched. Ryan, seeing her falter, acted on instinct. He grabbed a fallen rebel's explosive charge and hurled it at Zyric's feet. The resulting explosion sent the tyrant reeling, but it also caused the chamber to quake violently. "The temple's collapsing," Ryan shouted. "We have to go." The team fled through the crumbling corridors, barely escaping as the temple collapsed in a cascade of stone and energy. Outside, they regrouped, their numbers reduced but their resolve unshaken. "We did it," Soia said, her voice weary but triumphant. "The message is out." Ryan nodded, though his mind lingered on the strange energy within the temple. What was that place? It felt alive. Soia's expression was unreadable. The temples were built long ago, by beings who communed directly with the stars. Perhaps some of their power remains. As they made their way back to the jungle, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that their fight had only just begun, and that the temple's secrets might hold the key to their ultimate victory. The collapse of the temple marked a turning point in the rebellion. As the rebels regrouped at their jungle base, news began to trickle in from Zyric's territories, murmurs of unrest, isolated uprisings, and signs that some of his forces were beginning to waver. The broadcast had sown seeds of doubt, but Zyric was far from defeated. For Ryan, the victory felt hollow. The faces of those lost in the battle haunted him, and the memory of the temple's strange energy lingered. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something unfinished about their encounter with Zyric, as if the tyrant's power came from a source far more ancient and dangerous than anyone realized. The next target was the crystal refinery in the eastern cliffs. It was the heart of Zyric's war machine, converting raw crystal harvested from the planet into energy for his weapons and bioarmor. Taking it out would cripple his ability to supply his army. Soia called a council of the resistance leaders. Around the central fire, they debated strategy. "The refinery is heavily guarded," said Clyrix, his mandibles twitching. "A direct assault would be suicide." "We won't attack directly," Soia replied. "We'll use the terrain to our advantage. The cliffs are riddled with caves. If we plant charges at key points, we can bring the entire structure down." Ryan studied the map etched into the dirt. "What about the workers? Zyric's got a lot of his own people enslaved there, right? We can't just blow the place with them inside." Clyrix's antennae quivered. "Collateral damage is inevitable. They made their choice when they sided with Zyric. They didn't have a choice." Ryan snapped. "They're prisoners, not volunteers." Soia placed a hand on his arm, silencing him. "We'll find a way to evacuate them first, but it will require precision and time. Time we may not have." Clyrix muttered. Soia ignored him, turning to Ryan. "You've been working on those energy disruptors. Can they disable the refinery's defenses long enough for us to evacuate the workers?" Ryan nodded. "If I can get close enough to the control hub, I can overload the power grid. That'll knock out their security systems and give us a window to get people out. Then it's settled." Soia said, "We strike at dawn." The approach to the refinery was grueling. The cliffs were steep and treacherous, the air growing thinner as they ascended. Ryan's muscles burned, but he pushed on, driven by the urgency of their mission. When they reached the caves overlooking the refinery, the rebels split into teams. Soia led the main force to secure the workers, while Ryan and a small group infiltrated the control hub. The refinery sprawled across the cliffs, a labyrinth of machinery and glowing crystal veins. Crixie guards patrolled in tight formations, their armor shimmering with an unnatural green light. Ryan crept through the shadows, his heart pounding. The control hub was a towering spire at the center of the facility, its entrance guarded by two heavily armed Crixie. "I've got this," whispered Lyran, a wiry rebel with a talent for stealth. Before Ryan could respond, She slipped into the shadows and reappeared moments later, the guards collapsing silently at her feet. "Remind me never to play cards with you," Ryan muttered as they moved inside. The control hub was a maze of alien technology, but Ryan quickly located the power grid. His hands flew over the interface, his human ingenuity compensating for his lack of familiarity with Crixie systems. "Got it," he whispered as the grid began to overload. "Let's move." As the power grid failed, the refinery plunged into chaos. Security systems faltered, and the guards scrambled to respond. Soia's team moved swiftly, freeing the enslaved workers and guiding them toward the caves. But as Ryan and his team regrouped with the others, a horrifying sight stopped them in their tracks. In one of the deeper chambers of the refinery, they found rows of pods, organic, pulsating cocoons filled with a glowing green fluid. Inside each pod was a Crixie, their bodies twisted and deformed. "What is this?" Ryan asked, his voice tight with disgust. Soia's antennae drooped. "Xyrix experiments. He's been using the crystals to mutate our people, creating soldiers bound to his will." Ryan felt a surge of anger. "We have to destroy this place. Every last bit of it." Soia nodded, her expression grim. "We will. But we need to get the workers to safety first." As the last of the workers escaped into the caves, Ryan triggered the charges. The ground shook as explosions ripped through the refinery, sending massive chunks of crystal and machinery tumbling into the abyss below. The rebels watched from the safety of the cliffs as the refinery collapsed, a plume of dust and energy rising into the sky. For a moment, there was silence. Then, cheers erupted from the group. It was a major victory, a blow that would weaken Xyrix's hold on the planet. But Ryan couldn't shake the image of the pods from his mind. Whatever Xyrix was planning, it was far worse than he'd imagined. Back at the base, the mood was triumphant, but Soia's expression remained somber. "This is only the beginning," she said as she and Ryan sat by the fire that evening. "Xyrix will retaliate. And those pods, they're proof that he's been delving into forbidden knowledge." Ryan nodded, his jaw tight. "We need to find out what he's up to, and we need to stop it before it's too late." She looked at him, her violet eyes filled with determination. "We will. Together." As the stars glimmered overhead, Ryan felt a strange sense of purpose. For the first time since his abduction, he wasn't just surviving, he was fighting for something greater. But deep down, he knew the battle ahead would test them in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The days following the refinery's destruction were a whirlwind of preparation. The resistance grew in number as freed workers and disillusioned Crixie soldiers joined their ranks. Soia and Ryan worked tirelessly, their bond strengthening with every challenge they faced. But the shadow of Xyrix loomed larger than ever, and the discovery of the mutation pods added a chilling urgency to their mission. Reports began to surface. Strange, monstrous creatures were attacking outlying settlements, their appearance eerily similar to the twisted forms Ryan and Soia had seen in the pods. Xyrix wasn't just consolidating power. He was unleashing an army of abominations to crush all dissent. The resistance decided on a desperate course of action. They would launch a full-scale assault on Xyrix Citadel, a massive fortress perched atop the planet's largest crystal deposit. It was there, Soia believed, that the High Priest had hidden his most horrifying secrets. Ryan worked with the rebels to design an array of improvised weapons and gadgets. His crowning achievement was a crystal-powered EMP device, capable of disabling Xyrix's bioarmor and energy weapons. "This is our best shot," he told the assembled leaders on the eve of the battle. "We hit the Citadel hard. We take out Xyrix, and we end this nightmare." Soia stood beside him, her voice resolute. "For the stars. For our future." The battle was chaos. Xyrix's forces, bolstered by his grotesque creations, met the resistance with brutal ferocity. The air crackled with energy blasts, and the ground trembled under the weight of the monstrous creatures. Ryan and Soia fought side by side, their movements perfectly synchronized. The EMP device proved invaluable, leveling the playing field as Xyrix soldiers faltered without their technological edge. But the cost was high. Many rebels fell, their sacrifices carving a path toward the Citadel's inner sanctum. Inside the citadel, Ryan and Soia confronted Zyric in a vast chamber pulsating with green light. At its center was a massive crystal, its surface writhing with energy. Suspended within it were countless Crixie, their bodies twisted beyond recognition. "You've come to witness the birth of a new age," Zyric sneered, his voice echoing ominously. His bio-armor glowed with the same unearthly light as the crystal. "I will ascend, and my will shall shape the stars." "Not while we're still breathing." Ryan shot back. Zyric lunged, his movements inhumanly fast. The fight was brutal and desperate, the tyrant's mutated strength pushing Ryan and Soia to their limits. As the battle raged, Ryan realized the crystal was the source of Zyric's power. "We have to destroy it," he shouted. Soia nodded, her violet eyes blazing with determination. "I'll hold him off. Do what you must." Ryan fought his way to the crystal, planting the EMP device at its base. But as he activated it, Zyric roared in fury, hurling Soia aside and charging toward him. In a split second, Soia leaped between them, her blades plunging into Zyric's chest. The tyrant screamed, his body writhing as the EMP device detonated. The resulting explosion was blinding. The crystal shattered, its energy cascading through the chamber in a wave of destruction. When the dust settled, Zyric was gone, his body disintegrated by the energy he had sought to control. The twisted forms within the crystal were freed. Their suffering ended. The victory was hard-won. The citadel lay in ruins, and the resistance was battered but unbroken. With Zyric's death, the mutated creatures vanished, and his remaining forces surrendered. Soia stood before the assembled Crixie, her voice carrying the weight of their shared struggle. "The stars have spoken, and their will is clear. We must rebuild, not as divided tribes, but as one people." The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices a chorus of hope. As the celebration continued, Ryan stood at the edge of the ruins, gazing at the night sky. Soia joined him, her presence a comforting warmth. "You're a hero to my people," she said softly. He smiled wryly. "Funny, I just feel lucky to be alive." She tilted her head, her antennae brushing his shoulder. "You're more than that, Ryan Hunt. You're family now." For the first time since his abduction, Ryan felt a sense of belonging. Together, he and Soia looked to the stars, their hearts full of hope for the future they had fought to create.